John, so you haven't even looked at the list at all?
I have not.
Hell yeah.
Not
I love
one
it.
name.
I love it. Let me add that to it. We are live, by the way.
Is it okay if I drink chocolate milk? Because I haven't had anything to eat yet.
As long as you're not eating, I'm fine with it. You do whatever you want. John, you be you. You do what you do.
This entire thing is going to be gone by the time we're done.
Oh, that's the goal?
That's not necessarily
That's
the
disgusting.
goal. It's just what's gonna happen.
You disgust me, John.
Man, Brian, we've got a lot of traction since we posted this morning. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of things, especially as we get into the top maybe 10, actually top 5. But this is our show. Brian, last night we released your top 200 male CrossFitters,
well, we published it on the website, but
yes,
no one would know to check until we made the Instagram post today, I don't think.
Yeah, correct. So the graphic is this fire, by the way, except for as Brian brought up, Koski photobombing everybody, but
I would have liked Justin to be on there twice.
And we considered that as a possibility. We also considered putting you on there, John.
Yep. You and Hiller. Just hide you in there somewhere. So, well, let's just dive right into it unless you guys have any objections.
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, and
Brian, give some background. Yeah, give some background on it.
Yeah. So as Patrick mentioned, there have been some interactions this morning, which is great. I appreciate all the comments, questions, even Roman, John, I don't know if you saw, he asked me what I was smoking when I made this list.
Well, I wonder where you have him then. That's surprising. I feel like you'd have him pretty high.
Oh, yeah, he's way up there, but I think he's,
Again, I'm completely blind, have not looked at one thing. So don't spoil it for me in the comments. I'm supposed
well, you don't have to look at the comments,
react off the cuff.
Anyway, but one of the conversations that I had as a follow-up from the list this morning was like, well, what is this list? And that's obviously somewhere to start. So, basically the 2023 season ended at the CrossFit Games, and and then this is like the off season where you get a chance to kind of reset things. So I more or less consider the off season as a preseason more than a postseason. So it's like, this is a kind of a new slate following the games. The games is the end of things. That's how I always evaluate it. So as far as I'm concerned, once the CrossFit Games end, everyone's kind of back in the pool of available athletes to be on the list, meaning that in the later iterations of these rankings, prior to semifinals, prior to the games, whatever, I'm only considering the people who are left in the season that are competing as individuals. So if there's, so you'll see Scott Panchik on this list. There's a chance that Scott Panchik will attempt to compete as an individual this year. So he's on the list. You'll see Noah Olson on the list, even though he has said he's going to compete team until that team registers for the season. He's on the list. There are other people who are probably inside the top 200 fittest in the world, but they've never given a run at an individual competition. And so even though they might be, you could think of Christian Harris like this. Like I can't think of the last time that Christian Harris has attempted to compete as an individual in this CrossFit season. So even though he's probably one of the 200 fittest on earth, we have almost no data points on him in that regard. And so he's not on here. Now, if he just...
Would you consider Masters people for the top 200 fittest people, like a Sam Dancer? Because I feel like there's a lot of guys like that who are fitter than the top 200, or would be in the top 200.
Yes, and Sam's on the list. And one of the athletes that's not on this list that probably should be, or definitely should be, is Brian Wong. And that was just an oversight on my part, and I apologize to Brian. No intention of competing individually. So yes, Rich Froning's amongst the 200 fittest on earth, but he's not even competing in the sport anymore in any capacity that we really know of. So not on there. Whereas Brian was third place at the games last year in that really competitive 35 to 39 division.
I got you.
And he's, it'll be fun to see, especially how those guys do at semifinals this year, where they can do the exact same test at the exact same time. And we actually get a real, even though it's online, kind of a data point of where some of those guys will fall. So the other thing is that, I basically make a version of this list in August, and then I go and I travel to many competitions. I try my best to keep abreast of others that are happening that I can't be at, even if there's only a handful of athletes, 2 or 3 sometimes. For example, there was a competition in the Basque region of Spain a couple of weeks ago. Luka Čukić was there, Adrian Moonweiler, Anjola Kai, even though he got injured in the competition. So we're trying to keep a pulse on what's happening in the competitive sport of CrossFit globally as much as possible. But as with many people who will see this list, there's always going to be some element of proximity bias. If I'm at a competition and I see you compete, that's the best evaluation I can do. If I'm watching a competition remotely, that's the second best evaluation I can do. If I see the results on a leaderboard, that's the third best. And if you're an athlete who competes very little to none in the season or the off season, then we have the least amount of information on you. We could potentially look backwards to see things that you've done 6 months, 12 months, 18 months ago, but it's more difficult to assess the less proximity that I have to seeing you compete in relevant competitions recently. So that's kind of like a baseline. And as I'm going throughout these travels in the off season, obviously learning about people, adding them, removing them from the list, moving them up and down on the list, etc. And then the question, so that's good for probably the bottom 150 guys on this list. The top 50 guys are going to be guys that everyone knows and everyone has probably stronger opinions about, more information about for the most part. There are still a couples like Austin Hatfield, for example, who's inside the top 50 by my estimation, but we only have 2 data points on him, but they're strong data points. So we're still projecting some degree with someone like that. Most of these guys you'll recognize and know well. And then it's a matter of, especially at the top, and John, I know you haven't looked at all yet, but the biggest critique that I've gotten from anyone is about my guy here, Pat Vellner. So of course I had to, I made a little wardrobe change last minute to represent Patty V. And
can you you changed your shirt last minute?
Yeah, I always have the button here on the desk, but
where'd you pick him to finish in row? Just curious.
Second, I think. Third, fourth.
Oh, okay.
Second,
I thought you didn't change it. I thought you originally had him like 4th.
Where I can't remember where I picked him. Second, maybe
you might be right.
I think I had him second. I think I had Adler, Vellner, Roman, and then Ricky Brent,
whoever else.
Chandler, those types of guys. Yeah. Anyway, but that's like people that come to me after Rogan. They're like, dude, I told you Pat was going to win. You're always dogging. It's like, I've been a bit Pat Vellner supporter since 2016 CrossFit Games, and I was in the stands watching him compete in his first major competition. And I was like, this guy's amazing. He's just consistently showing up in the top 10, and I don't know where he came from. And I was doing a little study last night with Barkley Dale, and we were looking at, and the guy, like, once he's arrived on the scene, he hasn't gone anywhere. And if you see all the content that I put out, I have him ranked as the 3rd fittest man in the history of our sport. And I think that is pretty obvious, quite frankly, that he's, rogue picks, 2nd place. So, it seems pretty obvious, actually, based on his competition record, that that's where he belongs. And he's, he just happened to come up and compete at the same time as Matt Fraser, who's first on that list. So that happens. We talked about it with Laura and Tia, and it's, similar to Pat, especially in the off season. His performance is insane.
Question for you. If Matt Fraser was never a person, do you think Vellner could have been fitter than Rich as far as his exploits?
That's a good question.
Because winning does something to you. It's different than getting 2nd place or getting 3rd place.
Yeah, so you think, in 2016, if there's no Fraser, Ben Smith probably wins that year. They were kind of the best 2 guys, and then it was Vellner and Fikowski after that. The following year was, of course, the Ricky year. Even so, Fikowski got the better of Vellner that year, yes. The year after that, Vellner was clearly the 2nd best guy there. It was Hoegberg and Fikowski battling, so 2018 could have been a championship year for him. 2019...
I think he does better in 2019 because that first event, he made a really bad mistake trying to chase Matt.
Him.
And then he would have been in a way better position.
He wouldn't have had to take the risk on the sprint, so he probably makes the top 10. He probably has another podium finish, possibly, for sure. 2020, he had basically a torn groin, so I don't know if that's like whatever. 2021, and he loses to Medeiros. 2022, he was sixth. He could have a couple championships. I don't know if he'd have enough to offset.
I guess the 4 in a row by Rich is still just really hard. Yeah,
but there would be a good conversation potentially to be had, and it is a good question. So anyway, specifically as you get towards the top of this list, I think that's where there might be a little disconnect from and maybe we don't represent it well. It's like I guess the question is this a snapshot of the assessment of the field right now, or is it a projection of what I think is possible for the athletes in the 2024 season?
A power ranking versus this is what's going to happen at 2024.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, prediction, rankings and predictions.
Rankings and power rankings and predictions.
Yeah,
and so
there's a difference,
right? Mm-hmm. And so, and actually, I've appreciated the comments today and the feedback, and I think that it's something that I'm worth considering. So when I was making this list, I was basically thinking, what is a most likely possible expectation for them in 2024? Not necessarily if tomorrow we were going to bring all of these 200 men to a competition, who would win that competition?
Can you say it again? I got distracted.
So the question that I'm asking myself is here, when I'm thinking forward to 2024, what do I think is a possible expectation for these people? Not if we had a competition tomorrow, who would win that competition?
Right. Okay. So your prediction on what's going to happen in the 2024 CrossFit Games. If you had to make one,
well, they won't all make it there, but in the season, as the season progresses, if these men all had the same opportunity over the next 8 months to prepare and take
obviously
that test,
it can change, but like what you expect as of right now.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to say it.
And also not knowing what the qualification to the games is in terms of like what they're using.
Well, I'm not actually considering that, because if you have read the article and have looked at that list, there's way more men from North America inside the top 40, 50 in the world than can make it through the expected qualification system. But the qualification, that's why you can't just like take the CrossFit Games, copy paste and say, here's your top 40 people on earth, because we all know that there are people who missed qualifying for the games that if they had had the chance to be there, might have done significantly better. And that's where it becomes really difficult. What a good example is with what we do know about next year's season. If we just copy pasted that backwards to the 2023 season, Yellow Hosted doesn't make semifinals. He doesn't make the games. He doesn't make the Rogue Invitational. And then what do you do with this guy on a list like this? Compared to the fact that he did make it, he did great at semifinals. He did great at the games. He did well at Rogue. And now we have a decent opportunity to have a conversation about just how good this guy might be. And knowing all of that, and knowing that he's probably amongst the 20 best guys in the world right now, he might not make semifinals next year. And he said it himself in an interview that I'm better at the games than I am at semis. I'm better at semis than I am at quarters. Give me in live competition. He's
2015 Pikowski.
2014, 15. Yep. So that'll be an interesting case study to watch throughout the course of the season. But as it is right now, I believe if he had the chance to compete, that he would yield a performance somewhat similar to where he ends up on the list. So there's kind of a lot. Thank you guys for bearing with us. John, got a good idea now?
Yep, I'm with it.
Well, with that being said, that's why we brought John on, is for those, 200 to 50, because no one knows those guys better than John.
Absolutely. I would argue I probably know more about these guys than most people. I just don't know more than Brian does.
Yeah, definitely. Them. But that's a cool thing. That's what we'll have some discussions.
I know most of these names. Yeah. It's just, that's all I do. I just know their name.
Yeah. So coming in 200s, Tobias Fox. Brian, you want to mention who was right outside? Because I know there was some shuffling there towards the end. Was there someone like at 201, 202 that might have got bumped out?
Yeah. So just first of all, there's a few people that aren't on this list at all that if they were healthy and competing this year would be on the list. Taylor Self, Luke de Jong out of Australia, Dylan Pettit, who we believe is no longer competing, Willie George, who will be in Wadapalooza on a team, but I don't think he's going to compete individually next year, Zach George, Matt DeLugos are like 6 names that I would normally have put on the list that I don't think will be in the 2024 season next year. And then a couple of guys, Jake Standen out of Oceania, who had bumped out, and Joshua Hong, who I saw compete this year, were some of the names that were close to making it. But
yeah,
yes,
you did mention there might be some names here that are familiar, but most of those names that seem like they are familiar are from non-traditional powerhouse like regions. When we break down this 49 individuals, what did you find in terms of their region?
Oh, well, yeah. So down in this section of the list, there's probably the most balance across all of the competitive regions. There are 4 guys from Africa on this part of the list. They're the only 4 guys from Africa on the list. There are 4 guys from Oceania, 5 guys from South America, 3 guys, I believe, from Asia. And then the remaining of them, actually, there's a high concentration of athletes from Europe on this part of the list, and not that many from North America compared to the rest of the list. And these guys some of them are like still sort of hanging around. Like you see James Newberry there, never really know what he's doing, but if he shows up to competitions, he still does decently well. Some of them, like Sam DeMeester, is probably going to compete on a team again this year, but when he did compete individually, he was decent. I think he's gotten better since then. There's a couple.
Mark is pretty good.
Yeah, Kasper Gammelmark he broke through as the fittest guy in Denmark in the 2019 games. He doesn't compete that often anymore, but when he shows up, he still is quite good, like you said. Towards the bottom, we see a guy like Lago Giraldez. He actually really impressed me at Wadapalooza last year out of Argentina and had a decent semifinal showing. He's like 6'7", by the way, which is crazy. And then there's some guys like Nick Thomas there that he got injured at semifinals last year, so we'll see some up and coming or kind of on the fringe guys from South America that don't really compete in many competitions outside of South America. Ben Gutierrez, Esteban Ospina, that I would love to see compete in some other places eventually. Augustin Velishnik, actually we had an interview with him on the CrossFit podcast in the European semifinal after event 1, which he did I think he won his heat in that one. So it's a variety of guys kind of from old to new that I'm curious about them. I'd love to get some more competition data on most of them, but they're just like peripherally on the radar as really fit guys that we may see in glimpses throughout the season next year.
Can I ask you about Anton Foss? What has he done to make him on the list?
Yeah, Anton Foss got second place up at Turin Tuomiopäivä in Finland, where I was doing the commentary up there, and did
he beat anybody of note?
Yeah, another guy who's on here somewhere. Where is he at? Oh, Mika Liliorg, just a little bit below him. Both guys are somewhat intriguing to me. I just reviewed their quarterfinals performances last year. They each had one just like notably bad performance that kind of kept them out, and it was I think it was a crossover single under workout, which was kind of like I think I beat them on that workout, but they were really, really fit otherwise. So it's kind of just like a skill thing. But that's one of those examples of, me going on these travels when I have the opportunity to see people in competition. They're doing relatively well. Ludwig Hansen won that competition. You guys will maybe know Ludwig from the European semifinals the past couple of years. And they were fairly competitive with him. Are they one of the 200 best guys in the world? I don't know. There certainly could be some guys out there that I don't know about that aren't on this list, but I was impressed with what I saw from them and wanted to give them a little bit of credit for that, just in case that they do well this year.
Well, just going to throw this out here. I was ahead of Anton Foss in the fittest experience qualifier. That's why I asked.
I think that should have said, oh, no. Oh, I see. Oh, I was thinking of Anton Hassel.
There you go.
Oh, you threw me off there. Who's on there next to Lily?
I mean, these bottom 50 guys, I might know a little bit more than you do, Brian. So, I'm here to fix your list. I was about to say, I'm like,
two Antons in the same.
There's no
two
way
Antons
this guy is that fit, because if you're top 200, I shouldn't be beating you at anything that's not lifting.
Oh, well,
Coach L would disagree. Coach L would disagree.
I don't think he would disagree with that.
Yeah, Anton Foss. I don't know about his qualifier for the fittest experience. People did ask me about some online qualifiers today. It's really difficult for me to put a ton of
And I wouldn't
emphasis on
at
online
all. But like, I
qualifiers.
was just like, me and him
Yeah.
were right next to each other, and that's the only reason why I asked about his name. It's not.
Yeah, Anton Foss, excuse me, that I was talking about the wrong guy there, was he was at semifinals last year. I think he finished in the mid 30s out west, which is kind of like the back end fringe of North American guys that made this list. But there were a few that didn't compete at semifinals this year, but had good, much better performances the year before. And then out of those field of 60s, 30 to 35, 6, 7, something in that range, most of those guys will appear on this list.
Brian, I got a question. You have Keelan Henry here at 168, which is probably that is the highest ranking person from Africa, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now we know Jason Smith. He popped hot last year before the games. Where would Jason Smith have ranked in this list without popping hot?
Right next to Keelan Henry.
I mean, maybe maybe one. I guess it would have.
You say one spot difference.
No, I was gonna say like maybe 130 to 150 range, something like that. I think that obviously we would have had a chance to see him compete at the games and could have potentially learned something from there. But he could have done last place at the games, bottom 2, 3, whatever, and probably been out closer to this range, 165, 166. Keelan Henry, the thing about Keelan Henry is I think this guy's got a ton of potential, but he hasn't been able to execute at high level competitions. He was hurt at the games 2 years ago. He was hurt. I think he got hurt or underperformed or both at semifinals this year. And the two other guys there's 4 guys from Africa, Keelan and Darren, who are right there, 168, 169, and then Conrad and Ruin, who are 176, 177. Those are the 4 guys that if I was going to say right now, I have the best chance to take one of the spots take the only spot likely to the games from Africa, it would be one of those 4 guys. But I haven't seen them do anything relative to the rest of the field to really warrant a placing much higher than this.
Yeah. And Darren, if you correct me if I'm wrong, Darren finished second in Africa, correct? So
I think he was second and Conrad was third.
And Darren's the new kid on the block.
He's a new kid, but he would have went to the games, but they didn't extend the invite because the test came. I believe Jason appealed it, and it was like a week going in, so they didn't invite him. So Darren missed out on his first games appearance because of that. But
which is that's a bummer. Yeah, especially if you have a region that has one spot and circumstances end up being such that nobody goes to fill that spot, that is really bad in my opinion.
John, any names out here that stick out to you that you want to highlight before we move on?
I mean, we kind of glossed over everybody. I know we didn't gloss over everybody, but we got names that stuck out. Hal Fisher always does decent at semifinals, but this is about where I don't see any names that I think should be like way higher or what is that guy doing there, except Anton Foss, and I've already pointed that out.
So you think he should be lower, not higher?
Yeah, next 50.
I want to send a shout out to my St. Louis guys, Matt Green and Joel Laney, making a list. Yeah, former St. Louis police officers, by the way, and also I want to send a shout out to Logan because he's probably listening and he'd probably give us crap for not even saying his name. So Logan, good job. You made the top 200.
He's another one actually, Logan, that I feel like his potential is much higher than this, but in recent competitions when he showed up, he's been either injured or, so I moved him down quite a bit from where he was last year until he's able to show up and do what I think he's capable of. And he's still very young. Yeah,
definitely. All right, moving on.
Healthy too. He was hurt for a while.
Yeah. So 101 to 150. I'll just talk about this group kind of collectively while John takes a look at some of these guys. There's this, now we're getting into even in this case, we're getting into the realm of some athletes who have a chance to be very close to or potentially even make the games this year, the next year, the year after, something like that. There are a lot of young athletes here. There's a lot of potential in this group. There are also a few that have been around a little bit, Cedric Lapointe, Simon Montilla, that they're probably moving the wrong direction relative to some of these guys.
Simone Paquette.
Simone Paquette. But there are some really talented up and coming athletes. Some of them we've seen at some off-season competitions this year. A few of them we will see in either Dubai or Wadapalooza, potentially also Fittest to the Coast or Fittest Experience at some point. And one American Gladiator on the list. I mean, Australian Gladiator on the list.
Did you say American?
He's the gladiator of the world.
You should have just replaced Khan. I might do this, and instead of putting Khan, I'm going to put, I think Spartan is his name.
Oh, okay.
I'll just put Spartan.
So anyway,
Zach
this is
George
to me.
upset. He's not on there.
Yeah, I took him off.
Yeah,
and I didn't like how he treated his teammates.
No room for British gladiators.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, this is to me is an area of the list that is exciting because there's a lot of potential here, and something that's been encouraging for me as I've been doing these travels and covering more events this offseason is that many of you are starting to learn about some of these names too. So this is a kind of a blend of athletes, but there's a good amount here that I think are trending up, and that we might actually see some pretty cool things from individual workouts or even like semifinals as a whole this season. But John, kind of taking a minute here to look at it. Anything jump out to you?
Quentin McQueen, because we just saw him recently at Crash. And like, I had no idea who he was until Crash. I don't know if you did or not, but like, he definitely looked like he belonged with, I think, names that will be higher on this list. He did not look out of place at all. And I get we don't have a ton of data points on him, but I could definitely see him moving up higher than he is. I don't think he's too high or too low, but like, as far as somebody who could move a bunch, I could see him being on the come up.
Yeah, and he actually was supposed to be coming to Charlotte Classic this upcoming weekend, but he had to withdraw. I think he tweaked something in training a week or two ago, which was kind of a disappointing. His performance, if you didn't see it at Crash Crucible, we streamed the whole competition on Savant's podcast. Quentin had some home run hits. He looked really, really good at some pretty difficult stuff. He did have still a few holes in his game, but he had a good performance against a pretty good field. And I didn't know who he was last year. He's very young. He was I think he was an alternate on one of the Crash teams at semifinals, so he didn't even compete on the team there or on the floor in Orlando. But I had seen him compete in the team Crash Crescendo competition last April, and I was like, that guy looks pretty good. But there's a difference between doing it on a team, doing it individually. His performance at Crucible alone made me feel like he needed to be on this list. But I'd still like to see a couple other competitions from him where he can kind of back that up against some also good talent to move a little higher.
Mm-hmm. And then I think Dre Strom is fitter than where he's at. But I get it. I get that's where he's at. Like, you got to think, Dre for a while was like breaking on the door games caliber, and then it just never happened for him.
He was the prodigy. He was the Rich Froning prodigy.
Ooh, that's too strong of a word.
I mean, that's what
that means
then,
it's going to be something. Like,
I know, but
he could make the games, and then that's probably it.
But that's kind of what I remember when I got into CrossFit. It was 2015, 2014, 2015. When I judged at the regional in 2017, everyone was saying, well, there's Dre Strom. He's a mayhem athlete. That's who Rich is grooming to, be the next Rich Froning. And obviously, we see
they were mistaken then. Dre was never going to be the next Rich Froning. But Rich Froning's apprentice.
Yes.
You can call it that. That's a better word.
Yeah, definitely. That's a better word. Yeah.
But regardless, I think he's fitter than 139th. But I 100% get why that's where he's at on the list. It's kind of
I was really excited for it. The fact that he was going to be coming back next year. He had won a competition in the Midwest and kind of going away fashion. And I thought he would be a relevant figure at the semifinals. That didn't end up happening. So it's just kind of waiting to see. Like, he's one of these guys that we know he's out there. We know he has top end potential. But got to see him get through a season healthy and return to that form that we saw 2017, 2018 before we can really, I think, put him higher than this.
100%. I think, and then the next name that kind of stuck out to me, where was he? Colin Garnett. I think this guy is up and coming. He's a brute strength athlete. A lot of people probably won't know who he is, but we occasionally talk on Instagram. He's one of L's. He's probably L's best male athlete. And I just see he's a guy that I think is going to continue to improve. I'm not going to say he's going to make noise at the games. I'm not going to say that at all as far as like potential goes. But I definitely think he's a guy that's going to continue to get fitter and fitter. And like you take somebody like, I don't know, Elliot Simmons, like who is amazing engine, but kind of always been the same guy for like 5 straight years. Like people like Colin Garnett are going to pass that guy up.
Yeah, that's really a great example of the dichotomy of these 50 guys, where you have some people who've been around for a long time and maybe they've kind of plateaued or are moving back a little bit, and you have these other guys that are coming up. Colin's made the semifinals the last 2 years. He did basically twice as good this year as he did the previous year, and certainly is I'd love to see some more competition from him. I'm not sure if he'll do any off-season stuff. Do you know, John?
No.
Like it would be great to just even to see. It doesn't have to be Wadapalooza, it could be fittest experience, fittest to the coast, Charlotte Class. Like go out there and compete somewhere in the off season and get a little bit more competition experience and get another data point on the board. So that's a guy that I'll be looking forward to seeing him the next time he competes. I just don't know when that is.
And then Matt Poulin, I'm pretty sure is retired unless he came out of retirement.
Is he retired? That'd be great. We can move him off the list
and move John into the list.
I'm pretty positive. I was 201. I was the first person out of the list. Yep. He told me. I'm pretty sure unless he came out of retirement, somebody told me that he gets this itch every single time, the semifinals comes around, which I mean, who wouldn't? But I remember he made a post saying he was retired. I just don't know if that's stuck or not.
I feel like he's done that.
CrossFitters, I think CrossFitters in general are really bad at retiring.
It is really hard. That's really hard. I think it was 2021. There were a bunch of well-established athletes that were saying they were retired, and I was actually preparing to write an article for the Morning Chalk Up about it. And as I was writing the article, several of them just started competing again, and I was like, "What the heck?" I was trying to assess like the lifespan of an athlete that can perennially make the games, as like the first generation was kind of leaving after 6, 7, 8 years. And then they just all started continuing to compete.
This is a pinned post from semifinals, and it says, "Time for me to walk away now." But like John says, you never know when the open and quarterfinals comes around. But
so maybe Matt Poulin will be departing the list in the coming months. We'll see.
And
he's 27 years old.
He goes team. I don't think he's ever done team.
Mm-hmm. He might be he could be a great addition to a
team athlete for sure. And Brute Strength has a team that goes every single year to the games. Like I definitely could see that.
Yeah. Well.
All right. Back.
Sorry. Let me bring the list back up.
Lionel Franco, I think, is fitter than this, but he's been kind of trashed the last few competitions. I'm sorry, Lionel, but I stuck my neck out for you. I do think he's fitter than 111, but until he shows it, I would 100% get why that's where he's at.
Yeah, and we're on the same page there. Yeah, we're on the same page. He's recently changed where he's I'm on my Roman 5. There we go. Yeah, so basically what he's saying is he thinks I was smoking the pipe weed from the Shire.
Yeah. What Logan
like
brings
Roman
up,
does.
I think what Logan brings up is a good point, is like, these are, Brian, you said it yourself, prove them wrong. It's like, you want these athletes to overperform and prove you wrong. So if it takes something like this to motivate them to do that, then that's great.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of times on these lists, and we might see some of this in the next group of 25 or 50 when we get up there, but there are athletes that I see do something or a couple things in, that are really stand out to me. And when that happens, sometimes I'll even rank them a little higher than they probably deserve to be ranked.
Just like the home run potential.
Yeah, or just like you're kind of Patrick and I used to do this at Morning Chalk Up. We were just looking for the young guns, looking for the next thing, looking for the up and comer. And it's cool to be able to say, last year I had Bill Leahy ranked in the 30s, and I thought he had the potential to make it to the games last year. Showed up to semifinals, and I guess he was sick in the terrible event one and withdrew. Saw him at Crash Crucible this year. He did some great things. To me, he still has some things he's working on. So I've adjusted his ranking according to that. But it's lower than it was last year because I just kind of took maybe that was even 2 years ago. Like I saw some potential there. I took a shot on this guy. Logan was similar. I thought that he had this really high potential, put him up there on the rankings. It didn't live up to fruition that season. It could be a million different reasons why. Readjusted. And he's going to go back and reevaluate his own training. I'm sure he's already doing that, and probably come back and be closer to that top end potential that we know the next time we see him.
Yeah. Well, you brought up, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying about Leo in terms of him. He hasn't had the greatest competitions due to injury or whatever reasons, but he is now training at underdogs under Kiefer. So, and Kiefer's really high on him. So hopefully we see the best of Leo. I mean, I thought we saw the best of him.
I think it was top 10 at a semifinal a couple of years ago, like you said. Mm-hmm. And that's what I said. There are people, especially probably the first 20, 25 on this list, that if things go well for them this year, they could be flirting with a game spot when everything's said and done. So,
yeah. Go ahead, John. You got anything else?
Sure. And that next guy that stuck out to me was Norman Woodring. And he might be one of those guys that he can do some crazy stuff. So he's ranked higher than what he probably will put out in a competition. Norman might have the fastest 5K of this 200 meet of people.
He just did
all 200 people. James Sprague included, Yella Hosta, everybody, Ricky, who I think is the greatest runner. I know he's been lifting. He's not so much great anymore, but he will be. I think Norman is faster than them all.
Norman just did a high rock. Norman just did a high rocks this weekend.
I think that there's another person on this list. Is Michael Smith on this portion of the list? Maybe he's on the next one, but he also did high rocks recently. And some of these guys, he's coming up. He's 95. But Norman, I was looking, and I mean, he's continuing to do well. His last 3 semifinals were 19th, 16th, 18th. The 19th and 16th were out of 30. The 18th last year was out of 60. So he's just kind of hanging around, like Elliot Simmons, like John was saying. He's not necessarily making these dramatic changes forward, but he still is relevant when he shows up at these competitions.
And you're going to have guys like that. You're going to have guys. So it appears, and Norman, I'm sorry if it's not the case, but it appears that the CrossFit Games is not his number one. This is what I'm trying to do, because he's feeding into his strengths and he's not working his weaknesses, but he's always going to be fit enough because he started out in CrossFit. So he's always going to be fit enough to still place high in a semifinal, just not take that next step, which is fine. I don't think he's claiming that this is his live and die. It seems like high rocks is what he wants to do now, but he can do some crazy stuff though, for sure.
His time here, 1:0. It was only 8/10 of a second off Ricky Gerard's high rocks time. And that 1 hour mark is kind of where
he's running faster, because I bet Ricky's pumping on the CrossFit movements better.
Yeah. But that 1 hour mark is kind of like the barrier. Obviously Hunter McIntyre's kind of crushed it, but Hunter McIntyre is a high rocks athlete now. But that 1 hour, for his first high rocks with a 3-minute penalty and then tripping and just confusing course. Maybe you're right. Maybe high rocks is where someone like Norman goes. I mean, he did really
his time with a 3-minute penalty.
Yes.
Oh, so he was way faster than Ricky. He's waiting on Ricky.
Yeah. Yep. So that's pretty impressive. And there's some big money in high rocks. I mean, this one in Chicago, I think the prize purse was, $10,000 to, or maybe more for the winner. So, I don't know, just something to think about in terms of, but
you brought twice the earnings if you win a semifinal.
Exactly. So maybe Norman is on to something. I mean, he did really well in semifinals, a semifinal that had a lot of running in it, especially on an air runner, which he trains on. And like John says, the guy's probably has the top 5K amongst all CrossFitters, but he's best suited for something like that.
And I mean, that's his version of what Luka Dukic is doing. And I mean, that's fine. Go make your money. And then
let's move up. Last
Last thing is Harry Lightfoot, just because he's got the best name on the list. That's it.
Did you see that reel he posted?
I did. I guess he's allowed me to reintroduce myself.
Sevan. So I don't remember when that show is from, like a year or two ago, or maybe last year between quarters and semis. He was like, "Is this guy Native American?"
I tell you what, Harry, if you ever got good enough to be relevant, Sevan would never shut up about you. You'd be the number one talked about person on our show.
Yeah. He had a great.
Don't get me wrong, you're
season.
very, very fit. So when I say relevant, I mean big time.
Yeah.
Before we moved on, couple things. You have both the Fowler brothers on here, Ben and Luke from Oceania. I believe they're both New Zealanders, aren't they? Kiwis.
I think so. And the other guy from Oceania on this list that I'm really excited about is Zach Thomas.
Yes.
He's very young, 20 or 21. I think he's actually got Ricky's spot at semifinals last year, but then he did quite better than that. With 40 spots going to Oceania this year, he'll definitely make the semis unless he's hurt. And I think that he's got top 10 potential there at the very least. So young guy out of Oceania that's worth having on your radar.
Ricky actually brought that up to us. It's like he's the guy to kind of look out for. You brought up Elliot Simmons. It's unfortunate because Elliot hasn't been in the game since 2019, and he has so much potential. It'd be nice to see him healthy. Hopefully, we'll have a healthy Elliot Simmons at Dubai. I think he still plans on competing there, but he's one of those guys, like John pointed out. He's known for his engine and his CrossFit, and it'd be cool to kind of see him and see what he's been working on. Cedric Lapointe. That's a name I haven't heard in a while since West Coast Classic.
Is he still competing, John?
Cedric Lapointe?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
it's funny. There's a cyclist with the same name, and I know about that guy more than this guy. And
we'll see if we can get in touch with Cedric and find out.
But Cedric is one of those, I thought he was like the new influx of, along with Samuel, like the young Canadians coming in. And then he kind of, he had that one good year at semifinals at West Coast and kind of, he's had some difficulties since then. So he's kind of fallen off. So it's kind of cool seeing his name on there. And then your guy, and you keep on holding on to him, is Holgersson from Iceland.
Hey.
That's your boy right there.
I hope he comes back and competes. I hope he comes back and competes.
I mean,
but
you've been high on him for as long as I've known you. So we're over like 4 years now.
I've never heard of him.
Okay, well, first of all, just on Lapointe, because he didn't really compete last year. So he's one of these guys that we don't know, but he was 9th in the Open, 27th in the World in quarterfinals, 9th at a semifinal in 2022, 8th at the semifinal the year before there. So that's what Patrick's talking about. He was doing very well. Now we didn't see him for a year. I don't want to forget about him. So he's in here, but he may not compete. I'm not entirely sure.
Sure.
Who's the other guy you asked about?
Holgersson. Yeah.
Geraldo Holgersson showed up on my radar. I think it was it was the first, it was the second time I think that I went to Strength in Depth. I think it was the year that Fraser was there. It was a really competitive field. The kid was really young and he did very well, like a top 10 finish. I might try to pull it up and find out because it was so crazy. The athletes that he was competing with. Let's see, here it is. So this was the top 10 that year. Fraser, Sharonki, Hoegberg, Bronislaw, Yorgos Karavis, Andre Houdet, and then Geraldo Holgersson, ahead of Will Morad, Nikolai Bilodal, Sam Stewart, Alex Gatula, Zach George, Josh Alchama.
Yeah.
So he was like
18 at some time, 18 or 19. Yeah.
Okay. Keep going. And then
he's from Iceland. And I thought he was like gonna be maybe like the next relevant Icelandic male. And it just hasn't panned out for him. And then last year, I think he took a majority of the year off, maybe to try to get healthy. So he's kind of in a similar vein to Cedric Lapointe, where if the guy decides to stick with it, or if he's been sticking with it and comes back, I think he's got top 20 potential in Europe. But there is also a chance that we'll never see him again.
He sounds like a DeChico.
Yeah, but Angelo's on team. I mean,
it's not a terrible comparison. It's not a terrible comparison.
Good, like you think he's going to be something, and then it's like vanished.
I would say more like a George Stern or Nick Palladino. Like DeChico has come back and been good, but those guys were 18 years old. We're like,
if he comes back, I'm saying.
Right. So we'll see, but that's who Geraldo Holgersson is.
Okay. And then two other names. Trayvon Benton. It's a guy like he's like that. I always compare like CrossFit to like to UFC where they have like regional circuits. And Trayvon's one of those guys that always pops up and does these competitions. And he's still here, and he's one of those guys who just pops up and he just surprises you at a semifinal or here and there. And then also a guy I think that's going to move up higher on this list as the season goes along, especially once we get into the actual CrossFit Games season, is Seth Stovall. So those are just two names that.
Yeah, Seth, I was pretty bummed that we didn't get to see him at Crucible. I think he got an injury in training the week or two before and didn't make the trip out, but he was very good at the semis last year, top 20. I think he was right around 19-20 North America East, maybe 21, something like that. And a lot of potential, trains over there in Mayhem, so we'll see.
22 years old. So All right. Moving on, we break the top 100. Now we start these names should be very familiar.
Yeah, so we'll give John a chance to, take it in here. And now we're in a part of the list where it is likely that there will be athletes from this group that make the games. Some of them will come from outside of Europe and North America, as you see some of the best South American guys there, kind of in the middle, 70, 71, 72. You see some of the best guys from Asia, 91, 92, 93 over there. So we'll probably see a couple of these at the games. As far as the guys who are from North America and Europe, and of course there are a couple Australian guys in here too that are quite good. Jake Douglas, who was at the games last year, Peter Ellis, who maybe we'll talk about as an up and coming guy, that could of course qualify over there. Royce Dunn if he decides to compete this year. But the guys from North America and Europe that are on this list are basically in one of two categories. They're either really good, clearly top 100 in the world, but they're probably never going to make the CrossFit Games, or they're those types of athletes that I'm kind of projecting to do very well, but maybe they haven't done that well yet. So that would be more like a Colin Bossard, Bill Leahy type of guy.
What's Logan Collins doing nowadays?
I try to look into it, and from what I'm hearing is that he is probably done this year as an individual, and I don't know about team. I can't confirm it. It's just what I've heard. So, and that kind of brings up the point. There's also, Brian, there's also another subgroup in this group is you have a lot of athletes here who might be going team as well,
Correct.
So
and so that's where what I was talking about in the beginning. There are some athletes, and I used Christian Harris as an example for this. The guys from Omnia are also good examples of this, that they've never given us any indication of trying to compete in the CrossFit Game season as individuals or even really in off-season events. Other guys in this, sometimes they do kind of go back and forth. We saw Angelo compete as an individual a couple years ago. We saw Alex Smith do that. Tola throws his name in the ring in the individual sometimes. I think that they're probably going to all go team again this year. And once that's confirmed, which the next version of this list will probably omit most of those guys, as it'll be right around the open.
Yeah. I mean, you also have Joshua Alchama, Royce Dunn. Like I said, they haven't declared, but I imagine my gut feeling would say those guys are probably going team as well. And
this is hard.
And
there's hard because go ahead, Patrick.
Oh no. And but there's also a thing here with some of these athletes. Brian, you've heard me use the term gatekeeper a lot. Some of these athletes are gatekeepers or they're looking for their first opportunity to go to the games. And I think some of these guys, they probably be, I don't know, in their best interest if they really want to make the games is find another person on this list. I'm looking at you like maybe John Wood and Jacob Pfaff.
John Wood compete again.
Yeah. But have those two guys like last year. But getting those two guys or someone like a Tetlow and Jacob Pfaff, put them on a team together to, trying to, to make it to the games. But, that's just my opinion on that. But who am I? I'm just some dude. Go ahead, John.
There's not like it's weird because all the names that you have on this tier, like I'm like, okay, I get it. Okay, I get it. But then there are names, and I don't know where I would put them. But then there's like a list of names I would have lower and a list of names I would have higher. And it's not very specific. It's not like this guy needs to be behind this guy. Just lower than what you have them because I don't care for them. And I don't mean that. I don't mean that in like a really mean way, but I don't think they will do anything significant in the individual realm, because they've shown me that they're not going to. And then other people have shown me that they will do stuff in significant in the individual realm, and I think they should be higher.
Maybe you want to tell us on some of those guys at least, the ones you think should be
yeah.
higher.
No, I'll go lower and higher. It's okay. Like Ant Haynes, I think should be higher. I think what Ant Haynes did at the games, whenever he got to go to the games last minute, had no idea. His family couldn't come, and for him, and we all picked him last. We all thought he was going. We said he might have an event or two that he does well in, but he lasted way longer than any of us thought, and he did really, really well at the games for himself.
I think the argument towards that is Ant kind of goes, he's kind of very similar to who we talked about before in terms of he's a gamer. He's a guy, he shows up to the games and games
that
programming.
Should play into this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, perhaps. But would you rank Ant, if you're moving Ant Haynes up, does that mean you move Arthur Semenoff up?
I'll take Ant Haynes over Tola Morquinho any day.
Yeah, but my question is
through a whole games thing.
Yeah.
Him versus him, I bet Ant wins more events than Tola does.
At the games?
No, like 1v1.
Oh.
Like I think Ant Haynes as a person is fitter than Tola.
Yeah.
And like, no, I'm not saying you switch those two and Tola's 92 and Ant's 61. That's not what I'm saying. But
You might.
Ant should be higher and Tola should be lower, is what I'm saying. Like, say I should feel the same way about Griffin. Griffin's been doing grid league, right? If you're like Griffin has major weaknesses because he has major strengths, right? And like if he's doing grid league, he's not focused on his weaknesses. And if he is, it's not a Matt Fraser like focus. And there are going to be people that have that focus, and those people are the ones who will rise, who will make jumps in their fitness more than everybody else, because everybody's trying to get fitter. Everybody, right? So if you don't have 100% dedication to fixing your weaknesses and you show that on Instagram or whatever, and that's all I'm going off of, because I can't see a day in your life into your life, right? I'm going to think this person is not as dedicated to becoming the best version of themselves as this other person. And I don't think Ant Haynes is weak. That's it. He's got no other holes. He's weak, and then it's going to come up in 2 events, and the rest of the events, he's strong enough that he's going to be fine. And I think Ant Haynes is better than the whole 3rd column, and then I'd probably have him in the 2nd column. And it might be because of what he just did in the games, and like that's why I'm thinking that, because he did that and that was awesome. None of these other guys have done anything close to that. All right. So
yeah.
Garrett Clark was 16th in the semifinals. You put Garrett Clark in a major competition, what happens? Garrett Clark doesn't know where he's at. You saw where he was at Rogue. He was hurting every single event.
Yeah, and most of these guys would have been.
And Hayes was like 20-something in the games, 25th or something.
Yeah. Fair argument for Ant.
The Chico can't make the games.
He didn't qualify for the CrossFit Games.
Who?
Ant Haynes.
And then he magically got a ticket, and you saw what happened. I could say the same for Yella Hosta when he doesn't make the games this next year. He didn't qualify. It doesn't matter. When you have them in a games-like event where it's 15 events, who's the fittest man in the world, Ant Haynes will do better than most of these people on this tier, right? Tola is a glorified Anthony Davis.
Let's see next month. We're going to get a great opportunity to see many of these guys compete next month in Dubai. I believe that Katulis will be there. What?
I don't care about Dubai. I don't care if we do freaking deck squats and.
Well, but here's the thing: is when you have we have limited opportunities to see some of these athletes compete, so we have to take it for what it is. And I could say I don't care about Rogue. I don't care about Rogue. I don't care about how Pat. Why?
Because the fittest.
You can make an argument.
Can compete at Rogue.
Yeah, they do, but they don't always perform the same way at Rogue as they do at other competitions. All of the competitions have specific biases in them. We know that. We're just taking the data points that we have available. I think the case that you made about Ant Haynes is excellent.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that Dubai is irrelevant.
I don't mean to say irrelevant. It's not irrelevant, but it's not as important.
It's a pretty good field, especially on the men's side. I don't know how many of the. I think they've announced most of the field, but not all.
This is how I feel about Dubai. Dubai's like excellent to rank the Europeans, unless some random year where a bunch of the Americans compete in it. And like in the Europeans, you can make that assumption, but like Dubai had lately, and it can be different, right? When Fraser was going, it was different. It was up there with the best competitions. Lately, it just shows who's the best European, and Lazar Dukic is going to, he'll be winning, or Roman will win, or whatever. There'll be one or two. I know Ricky's doing it too. So, I mean, the top field's going to be really fun. But lately, it's just who's the best European. And then once they get to the games, it's a different story. Like Dubai doesn't mean anything once they get to the games, right? Like, and so it's.
But you think Rogue does?
100% Rogue does.
How come Travis Mayer has had 3 better finishes at Rogue than he's ever had at the CrossFit Games?
It doesn't matter. Like Rogue, like
you can't have it both ways.
You know this. No. You definitely know this. Patrick Vellner would love to have Rogue every single year for the games. Okay, Rogue favors certain athletes do better in Rogue than they do the games. I would put Chandler Smith in this category. I know he just had his like worst Rogue showing, but you know what I'm saying with this. Vellner loves Rogue. Mayer does better at Rogue. Hopper will do better at Rogue. Like, and then Danielle Brandon will do worse at Rogue. Like Haley Adams will do worse at Rogue. Like it favors certain athletes, and other athletes are going to be better at the games, and they will be at Rogue. This is why I think Tia is going to ruin the games, because for everybody else, not just ruin the games to watch.
Like, she's going to demolish the test.
Going to demolish the field. Yes. Because that Rogue competition favored Laura Horvath in every way you can. And Tia was still just 5 points from her, 5 months off of having a baby. I'm saying Rogue favors certain athletes. Dubai always usually favors conditioning, right? We know this.
That's why Fabian Benito won last year?
It said usually
over Fikowski.
Fabian Benito. Oh my gosh, y'all are ridiculous. It doesn't matter.
I hear what you're saying, but
in these competitions, it does not matter who wins. That's why Vellner's not number one on your thing, right? I'm assuming he's not number one. He better not be number one. If you had to defend him, he's not number one. But why is he not number one? Because he just won Rogue kind of easily, right? He could blow the last event and still win.
Blow the last 3 events and still win.
Right. Why is he not number one? Because Rogue, Dubai, Wodapalooza, you cannot use the ranking, the placing, and you don't make this mistake. But like Brian Spin and like Watkins makes this mistake a lot. They will use this placing as, oh man, they got second at this. They're going to be this high at the games. But you can use certain events. For instance, Alex Gazan, any deadlift workout, I'm going to pick her because she's going to be a monster, right? I know this now. I didn't know it before. It does not, like, you use certain things that happen within the competition to make your games picks. You don't use their placement because every competition favors a brand of athlete except the games.
But we're saying the same thing in that regard.
Okay.
I'm saying that
I know I went on.
There are lessons that can be learned.
Good, John.
There are lessons that can be learned from the Rogue Invitational.
This is why I think Tola and Griffin and Alex Gatoulis, wildly different people, but are ranked too high. And I think people like Ant Haynes, Scott Tetlow, I think should be ranked higher. John Wood, I think should be ranked higher. Baden Brown and Royce should be ranked higher. Adrian Munweiler, I got no idea what that cat's doing, but if he wants to do CrossFit, he should be higher.
He's on the European regional circuit.
I mean, look, but when you see the people that are in the top 50, you just
maybe I'll change my tune. Yeah.
Then you just start to realize that there's a lot of depth on the men's side, and while in this case, I'm gonna the one thing I'm gonna give you here is Ant Haynes probably could be higher than this. He was top 30 at the CrossFit Games, but that's not in and of itself alone the only factor that you need to consider. Same as any of these other competitions. I'm not sure if I hear you saying that there's a bias at Rogue's programming, there's a bias at Dubai's programming, Wadapalooza's, and we know these things inherently. We're actually learning more and more about them with some of the studying that we're doing in the background. But is there not also a bias at the CrossFit Games when it comes to programming? And are there athletes that are like a Haley Adams that are going to do better at that than they will at something else? And why? And so all I'm saying is that some of these guys are going to be competing in Dubai. Some of them, like Griffin Raleigh, we don't get to see compete that often, and we'll get to learn a little bit more about him. And he might be totally embarrassed there and finish 25th out of 30. And I might reassess and say, yeah, I don't think Griffin is deserving of this ranking anymore. And Haynes will be there too. We'll see how he does.
Actually, Griffin competes every weekend.
Yeah, right. But not against these guys.
Which is why I think he should be lower. Like, it's not necessarily like his placement in Dubai doesn't necessarily.
So what does matter in terms of Griffin to you?
For Griffin specifically, like Griffin a couple of years ago, I think he's ranked too low. But like, it just seems as lately, like his priorities are not what I would. If anybody is not like, for instance, Danny Spiegel, whenever you do the top 200, I'm always going to like not care about Danny Spiegel because she's probably going to make the games and she'll have 2 or 3 events where she kills and she refuses to work on her weaknesses.
I don't think that's fair at all to say. Her running performances
so?
have been dramatically better in the last 2 years than they were prior to that.
Dramatically better?
Yeah, where she could actually finish the run instead of walking from the first onset of it.
Bro, if you're one of the fittest women in the world and you got to say, I finished the run this year, get out of here.
You said she's not working on her weaknesses. I'm comparing her specifically to herself.
You should work more than. You don't go ahead.
Spiegel, she's a decent example. I don't know what Spiegel's goals are in life and in CrossFit.
You do know what their goals are. You do know what her goals are.
Tell me what they are. This is a men's show, by the way. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the women, but it's a good example. She's trying to make money, and she is probably making a ton of money. She's also continually showing up to CrossFit competitions and doing pretty well against the field. Yes, she missed the games this year by, I don't know, 1 spot, 1 point, whatever it was, after traveling to Saudi Arabia to make some money the week beforehand. Fine. Then she did the qualifier, made it to Rogue. She shows up there, has some good, some bad, and just about what we'd expect to see. I'm saying if you looked at the last 5 times that she did a long distance running event, that she's getting better, not worse, compared to herself. That's all you can really do is improve from where you are. And the field might continually pull farther away from you. That's fine. You might be able to find the secret recipe and narrow the gap with the field. Sometimes that happens, but if she's improving relative to herself, then that's good.
My thing with Danny Spiegel, and this is why I'm so like just down on her, is that I think she could have the ability to be routinely top 10 because of how much of a home run ability she has. But I think other things hold her back from reaching that potential, and she cares about those other things, or appears to care about those other things than reaching her full potential. And I don't care for that. You know what I mean?
That's enough on Danny Spiegel for the men's show.
You disagree?
No, I've already said what I have to say about her.
Okay.
Anyone else in this group here that you think is
I wish Jake Berman could be higher.
But
he can't be.
Not right now.
No. I completely agree with your Jake Berman placement. I just wish he could be higher.
Anyone on this list that you're really curious or excited to see next year?
Will Leahy.
Of course, Bill. Yep.
I mean, he's kind of like the most controversial male out there that's not like a household name.
You think this is a decent spot for him?
If you tell me what I think 2024 is going to happen, no. Because I think he'll make the games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this is what we said, is that there are guys on this list that might make the games this year.
I get it. I think he could be top 20 at the games, though.
If he gets in.
And like, that's what I'm basing this off of. Is Yellow Hosta higher than this? Yeah.
Yeah, but I know.
Mm-hmm. That's my point. I think Royce Dunn should be higher, but we'll see what the top 50 is. I think Royce Dunn and if you again, Royce Dunn, there's no guarantee he's going to make it or he's going to go team or he's kind of divided everywhere. But like if he's in the games, I admire Royce Dunn as an athlete.
Making the games out of Oceania for the men is about to be
all of a sudden
next to
got
impossible.
really, really, really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's go to the next group on the list, Patrick, and take a look at some of these guys. So if there is someone on this portion of the list that you feel should be higher, then you have to realize these are the guys that they have to unseat in order to get up there. And I can already probably predict one athlete that John's just going to completely demolish. Let's see.
But before we go, you brought up Bill, but I think you have an athlete in Europe that could probably be compared to Bill Leahy, not in terms of some of the stuff he's notorious for, but in terms of a young up-and-coming athlete, is a Colin Boshard, Victor Helsinghoff, and Luka Vunjak. I think those are some guys to keep an eye out in Europe.
I would
guys,
say,
Luka's
those
been
guys,
around.
Colin, I really like. I think that he's young and needs to get a little bit stronger, but everything else he pretty much has. Luka Vunjak, I was really high on the last 2 years. He kind of let me down last year at the start of semifinals. Got a really slow start. He did rebound a little bit, so he's kind of just treading water for me.
Yeah.
And Victor Helsinghoff surprised me at semifinals this year. Would love to get some more competition data points for him, but I'm not really sure what his top end potential is yet.
Yeah, but I think those are the type of guys that might unseat someone like a Wisłowski, who made his first appearances kind of on the older side, that you have ranked 75th here. And then one final thing, this is where you have Sam Dancer and Scott Panchik listed 64 and 65th. So
yeah, and I do wish I had Brian Wong at some point in here as well.
Yeah, and then go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Is Morteza in it?
Yeah, he's right 93rd.
No.
Oh.
Is he in CrossFit?
Yeah, he couldn't get a visa to come over.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if that was confirmed or not. I just knew he wasn't going and I kind of forgot about him.
Yeah. And then last final thing is this is where you have the South American athletes all grouped together. The final, we'll talk about one more later on, but we have 70 through 72, Souza, Cerveni, and Rochelle May. So
and Augustine has just not had the best semifinals the last 2 years. I think he's, all things equal, I think he's probably fitter than those two Brazilian guys, but they got the best of him last year. So just kind of grouping them together there. I believe that Kalian and Kaike are supposed to be competing in Dubai, so we will get to see them compete again this offseason, which is nice. Augustine, I'm not sure.
Okay.
You remember when we first saw Kaike? His name.
Yep.
We spent 20 minutes trying to figure out how to say his name, and then he sent us an Instagram message of how to say it, and we still didn't know how to say it.
We spent 20 minutes trying to figure it out, but we also were perfectly okay with getting it wrong.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what's the next.
We're going to switch here. I'm going to go from the website. So, by the way, if you want to see the complete list, go to BeFriendly.com. That's where the whole list is available. If you go to our Instagram, we broke it down to top 50. So, we'll start with the 41 through 50.
Okay.
41 through 50. All of these guys are North American and European. I think it might be a 5-5 split, actually. Yep. Got some older guys on here, obviously, with Tim Paulson, Bronislaw. You got some younger guys in here for sure. Zanoni, still young. Victor Hoffer. And then you got Jorge Fernandez, who's an interesting one to me. I think he's committed to going individual this year. I'm not sure where that's going to end up yielding him amongst men in North America, but I do think he has a pretty good skill set, a well-rounded skill set.
Yeah. And he has a new coach, and he has a new training environment this year, too.
I tell you what, so you have Bronislaw this high. Straight up, you think Bronislaw is fitter than Royce Dunn? Straight up.
No, probably not.
I don't. Bronislaw barely made it to the games, and then he's able to show off some.
He did do pretty well at semis this year, actually.
I know he did. I was the only one who said he was going to. I know that.
That's not true.
I was the only one that said he was going to make the games this year. You did not. You did not.
I picked him one or two spots out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Don't act like you did.
Yeah. I thought it would be close because he's in.
Go ahead.
I think last year he made a recommitment to his fitness. I think that we saw some, and I don't mean his strength, I mean his fitness. And I think that we saw some fruits of that. And I think that there's still more to come.
That's fair. I mean, he's 34 though.
Yeah, it is amazing. So, I will say on the men's side in general, I've been impressed with how well guys who have been doing this for a long time and are pushing into their early 30s are still able to hold up against the field. There's a growing towards a dozen names in that regard right now.
So I think you should have Luke Parker like 41st.
Okay.
Or higher. I think Luke Parker should be a lot higher. I don't know. I won't know until I see the other names. Might not higher than that guy. But of the current people that you have above him, I would put maybe not Tim Paulson, but it's kind of just what have you done for me lately? I would have him above everybody else. Luke Parker shocked the fire, I think, out of all of us because we didn't think he'd make the games. He had a great semifinal. Mm-hmm. And then he was like up and down at the games, right? Didn't he get like 30th?
Yeah, right around there. And I mean, I was absolutely blown away by what Luke did at semifinals last year. For me, I'm just kind of wondering if that was the perfect storm of events and tests for him, or if he is actually taking the next step and he's like a guy that if you want to go to the games, you need to get past him to do that. Mm-hmm. Haven't seen him, I don't think, in any of the offseason stuff yet. Would love to see him compete. I hope he competes at Wadapalooza. I don't know if he's planning to or not. But, if you look at his last three competitions, the games was okay. The semifinals was amazing. And he was 7th place at the fittest experience. So those three things in isolation, they don't line up. They're not congruent with a top 30 guy in the world. If you're top 30 guy in the world, you're not taking 7th place at the fittest experience. That's like, if you're taking 7th place at fittest experience, you might not even be on this list if that's the best thing that you've done.
No, yeah, and that's why I was so down on him going into the semifinals because I was at that competition, and I mean he was the biggest name there. I mean Jack Rosema was also there. So like I mean other than people like me that know that guy's name, like Luke Parker was the biggest name there. There wasn't any like games guy that was there, and I expected him to like murder, and he didn't. Like he was very.
Yeah, Jacob Marlowe won that competition. He's somewhere on here, low.
He's 60, I think, 60 something.
Yeah. Marlowe, I think even 109.
I mean, if 109 destroys you, not just beats you, but destroys you, like
that's what I'm saying. So Luke's a tough one to peg because over the last 12 months, he's had 3 very different competition, outputs. And I could certainly see someone ranking him higher than this. I'm still a little bit conservative on him. I want to see more excellence consistently from him.
Yeah, I don't mind that. It felt like to me after semifinals, and I mean the games was fine. Like I mean he didn't do terrible, he didn't do great, but like it felt like he took the next step.
He was, by the way, he was 28th, and you were asking about Ant Haynes. He was 30th at the games.
Ant Haynes, right? Yeah. It felt like he took the next step up in his fitness, where he was just a semifinalist, and now he's like a lower tier games athlete. And like in my head, he's a lower tier games athlete.
And for men in North America, lower tier games athletes don't always make the games.
100%. 100%. No, I don't.
As we'll see with some of the guys in the next group of 10.
So far, I'm very happy that I haven't seen Hatfield yet.
You're about to see him.
I'm about to.
But you're also going to see, I am also projecting at least 1 and maybe 2 names in the next list that are going to make you blow your top.
Yeah. He did just to piss you off.
All right.
That's not true. That's not true.
I know.
I think first of all, I think John's doing a great job of assessing the list blindly. And, this is very challenging to do. I'm trying to get a best representation of the best 200 guys in a global sport that you don't get to see necessarily compete that often. And, I was always fearful of putting the list out because I feel like I'm going to miss someone or I'm going to misrepresent someone really, really badly. It's just kind of me trying to do the best on my own with the data that I have. I think it's pretty good, but I would say that a couple of the names that he's picked out have been I would agree with what he said, and I'm just curious for this next group.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear it. Let's see it.
Before we go, Tim Paulson, we still don't know what his season looks like. So that obviously, just like everyone else, that might move some people on and off the list. And shout out to Jack Rosema, Army Warrior Fitness Team. And then I'm really interested to see how Brion and Zanoni, how they bounce back after last year.
Yeah, I think Guillaume will be. I think he's going to Dubai. I think Zanoni is going to Fit Fest, which is less of a real opportunity to see him compete. But they're both still competing. Zanoni recently won. I think it's either the biggest or second biggest competition in Italy. So he's still out there doing his thing, but didn't have a great semi last year.
I'm surprised. I haven't seen like Luka Dukic. I feel like he would be.
And moving on.
He's in the next 10.
And moving on. 31 through 40. Brian, go ahead and talk while John digests this.
Yeah, so even at this point in the list, there's a good blend of young and old, and some of these guys may never do this well again. Some of them have, I think, are still kind of ascending or finding their own footing. It's not a ton of names to digest, and I'm sure John has some opinions right off the bat.
All right, John, go ahead.
I mean, I feel like you got Luka too high right now. No offense to Luka. I love Luka. But I don't know. Is it because he just wins a bunch of European competitions? I don't disagree that his fitness is around here. I've yet to see a competition where like it's shown that.
Well, I mean, to me, like very disappointing last year that we didn't get to see anything from him at semifinals because apparently he had the flu, and that's really is one of the two competitions that it's one of two competitions that he'll do every year that gives us a real good idea of how fit he is relative to this group of guys. Last year, he did compete in Dubai. He finished 7th there. You know, he was ahead of some good athletes, including his brother Wazalowski, who made the games, Vuniek, who we talked about, Fasa, Karavis, who's pretty good at those things usually, Guillaume Briand, who previously made the games, but he was also behind Daniel Lakai and Alex Catoulis. Now Catoulis really does well in Dubai many years. So, Luka Jukic is a difficult one to assess. I would say that for sure. And he's definitely has a lot of talent. He's competing more often than anyone else on this list, but against less of these guys than most of them. So I would say pretty difficult to assess. I think he's probably somewhere between the 30th and 50th best guy in the world. And this is just kind of where I ended up having him.
Okay. Sharanki, does he do another CrossFit competition?
I think he's also planning to do Dubai this year.
I think Dubai. Yeah, he's planning to do it. Him and Ematal should be doing Dubai, I believe.
But for 2024 games?
What?
I don't see him doing better than what he did last year.
Maybe not. Yeah, but Sharanki's, man, he's been around for a while. He was, I think, I can't remember which year it was of the sanctional years, but yeah, he had gotten second. He had second in that strength and depth of the competition that I talked about with Holgerson behind Fraser. And then he's had a bunch of injuries. He's changed his training environment a lot, but he and Ematal have been competing for a long time, training for a long time. They seem to be motivated and dedicated after making it together for the first time to the games last year. I do think that he'll have another good season this year.
And then I would trade Tyler Christoffel with Luke Parker. I feel like Luke Parker is the new Tyler Christoffel. Tyler Christophel's never made the games. This is well recorded. He's had a lot of chances to.
COVID game. He made COVID games.
That doesn't count. And then Luke Parker has made the games. So, like, in my opinion, as far as like the Mayhem hierarchy, Luke is, I think, higher than Tyler. I would just trade those places, and I think those are good. Is Alex Vigneault the one that's gonna?
No, I actually thought Tudor was the one that was going to piss you off the most, and you haven't even mentioned him.
Why?
I don't know. I just felt like
he hasn't been very fit.
Yeah, well, that's why I thought you would say that.
I have no problem with Tudor. Tudor has like some of the greatest home run ability out there, but I mean, he just has to get fitter. Like every single competition he does. If it's CrossFitty, he's just behind everybody else.
That one semifinal, was it the Syndicate Crown? That was the one competition that I saw him do where I felt like he was actually like peak fitness.
Was there a snatch there?
That was the complex that year, right?
The
It
Bella
was
complex.
a Bella complex, and then the final did have
Handstand
some like
walking.
snatches at 205 or something like that. No, there was a handstand walking event with the GHG's
that was
wall
the one
ball.
that Will Morad and James Sprague had the
At
whole.
the and at the end.
Yeah.
But that was, to me, that was probably his best individual competition against the elite fields.
You thought that I would think he's fitter than this?
No, I thought you would think he should be lower than this.
Oh, I mean, he's fine.
But I think it's like,
yeah. I don't mind him. You think Alex Vigneault's on the way down?
yeah, he and Caron are the very curious ones to me on this list in terms of that. As for Tyler Christoffel, while I do think Luke has the potential to be better than him, I also think that he has the potential to be worse. I think Christoffel is he's pretty consistent, and we've had consistent output for him. And at this ranking here, it's basically it's not good enough to make the games amongst the North American men. So it's just kind of on the outside.
We'll see. And that's just, you think they're on their way out and the sport's starting to pass them up, and we'll see if they can hang on or not.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I do think traditionally they should be a little bit higher, but I mean, I get it if that's the reason.
I have 26 North American men in the top 40. So Christophel's ranked 26 amongst the North American guys only. That's counting Roman.
Which is fitting because 22 make it in.
22, 23. Yeah. So that's kind of, to put into perspective what this kind of a ranking is, that would mean that guys like, Farlow, Tudor, Grayshaber, Calderon, Vigneault, Hatfield, Sprague, those are the ones that are, or Sprague's the next guy up, but those are the guys that are battling for those last spots.
Hatfield should be top 20.
All right. That was my next thing. Let's talk about Austin Hatfield before we move on. 31.
He's the next thing coming. He's the next guy that's going to pop on the scene.
That could very well be true.
I really do think so. His first competition was semifinals, and he got 12th. Or he was going to go to the games if Spencer didn't have this miracle last day, which is great for Spencer. It was a great comeback.
And he's done before.
Yeah, sure. But that was Hatfield's very first competition ever. He just seems like a backwoods guy from West Virginia, and I love that. I lived in Eastern Kentucky for a while, so I love that about him. And he's just, I think he's the next thing coming. He has massive
look.
home run
With two competitions, he did not make the CrossFit Games. He came very close against what I think was the most competitive semifinal field for men. And then he won the Crash Crucible. Amazing. And that warrants 31st on the list. I think that's a great ranking for a guy with two competitions, and not much else do we know about him yet. I think his potential is super high. How high? We'll see. I only take pictures with champions, though.
Yeah. One thing interesting about Austin is he is a Mayhem athlete, and you have to wonder if he's going to ask for more out of the Mayhem programming.
Did y'all hear that? He's a Mayhem athlete, and I'm high on him. I love Austin Hatfield, and he's a Mayhem athlete. I want that to
and you love Luke Parker.
Yep.
You're a Mayhem guy, John.
I'm all about Mayhem today.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can totally understand people who would like to see him higher on the list. I think that given what we've seen from him so far, this is a good ranking, reflective of someone that I have a high degree of belief in. And let's see what he does. By all means, he makes the games next year. He finishes 20th. You'll see him higher on the list.
And Hopper might have ruined that for Brian. The first emotional pick I've ever seen Brian do was put Hopper a second place at the games after he won MAC, and he bit us all. So
I did the same. I did the same as well.
And so did Dave Castro. That was the first time in 4 times that Dave's been wrong about an athlete like that also. So Hopper fooled us all.
Yeah. Before we move on, again, there's a good mixture of veterans here, like you mentioned, Vigneault, Caron, and then you have the teen alumni here in Jack Farley, Tudor, Magda, Cole Grieshabers, who are moving up the rankings here. And then you throw in Austin Hatfield, who is very young himself. I believe he's 23. He's in his early 20s. So, yeah. So speaking of the top 20, 30 through 21, you already gave us a teaser on James Sprague. But here's the list, Brian. Your thoughts on this list right here?
Yeah, I mean, very well established group. I'm not 100% sure if Cole Sager's competing again or not next year, but until we know for sure, I'm going to still give him that respect. And I don't know. I think that I don't feel like there's a ton of debate on this section of the list. I feel like this is like these guys are pretty solidly established in the sport. They can do better than this for sure. They also have a couple of them have the chance to, miss the games on any given year.
You had a person ask you about James Sprague in the comments. Did you want to address that here, or did you already address that?
John, do you think this is appropriate for Sprague?
I do. But I think James is coming, man. I think the stuff I've seen, and listen, it's just on Instagram, so take that with a grain of salt. But it's not like his fitness is what I don't know. We know he's very fit. What we don't know is that he's weak, right? And like the stuff he's been posting on Instagram lately, like the weights he's been posting, I'm very high on James Sprague this year. I think James Sprague is going to have like a Fikowski-like improvement from not making the games to maybe not a Fikowski-like improvement because he went to 4th place. Maybe not that. But like it would not shock me if James Sprague is like top 15 next year at the 2024 CrossFit Games.
Yeah, I mean, James, actually, of all the athletes that competed at Crucible, he was the most impressive to me, even though he missed the podium there. I felt that some of the things that were demanded and rewarded were not very favorable for an athlete of his build, and he still did extremely well. I think that James has, tons of potential. I thought he had a great season last year. He seems to be training very well. He's traveling around training with some different people, I think that can be very valuable for someone like him. And I agree with John. I would not be surprised at all if he improves upon his finish at the games last year. Was it 25th?
I think so.
25th
sounds right.
Let me go back and
25th. Yeah, 25th. And but like I said, there's some guys in this range that made the games last year that aren't going to make it next year. And so we'll see. He snuck in this year, capitalized on it. He's looking good. He looks like he's trending up. I just want to see kind of him do what Colton's been able to do. Make it again, improve from year 1, make it again, improve from year 2, and then he'll get some of that respect on this leaderboard.
A name I noticed that's been kind of sliding down your rankings is Samuel. Is that due just because maybe you overranked him to begin with? Because I think I'm guilty of doing that as well. But he's making the slide.
John, I'll let you follow up on this, but he's a mystery to me. Like it seems like he should be, quite frankly, in the top 10. But when it comes to competition, he doesn't
drink some kind of lake water when he gets into competition.
Yeah, he can't seem to put it together to even really crack the top 20 at the games. He's always just outside. So I can't justify him any higher than this.
I don't disagree. I think a healthy Sam Cornway is like 11th or 10th, like right around like Travis Mayer material as far as where he places in the games. Maybe even top 10 if it's like he gets lucky with the events and it's just a couple like home run hits that he gets tossed his way. Like the pig chipper with the 48 ring muscle ups a couple of years ago. Sam is really, really fit, and he just does not show it.
Every guy on this list is really fit at this point.
No, he's fitter than these guys.
But he doesn't show it in competition. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's like Karen Freyova. I know, she's the same way. I think Samwell.
The thing about Karen is that she does show it, just not when she competes in North America.
Well, Brian, this is a men's show. We'll talk about that when we get to the women.
Yeah.
Let's
move on. Final word, Samuel.
Yeah, I mean,
I think we agree. I think we both agree with Sam.
Yeah, and I would love to see him string together some performances that kind of affirm what we believe is possible. You just haven't seen it yet.
All
right, John. We're getting into the ones that people are probably most interested in. Here's the top 20. If you're not watching or you can't see this, I'm just going to read them.
11.
A bet?
Yeah.
let me just read through the list here for the top. These are 11 through 20, and then you can make a bet. 11th,
Okay.
Bjorgwin Carl Gudmundsson. 12th, Samuel Quant. 13th, Chandler Smith. 14th, Noah Olson. 15th, Jason Hopper. 16th, Saxon Panchik. 17, Jay Crouch. 18, Yellow Hosting. 19, Bailey Martin. 20, Guy Maeros. Yes, John.
I bet that Lazar is 10th.
He's not.
He's
He's
not.
not.
Oh, you should have took him up on the bet.
9th. Well, I'm not betting money. It's
Oh,
just
okay. Gotcha.
Lazar and BKG being next to each other is just a thing that always happens.
Lazar's 9th.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. Okay.
So anything on here that's like, I think that's way too high, way too low.
Can you show me 20 through 30 again? 21 through 30 again? Real quick. Real quick. Okay. I would put Guy where Heinrich is.
That's funny. I called Brian. I actually called Brian about his Guy pick, and we talked about it. And I actually used him and Heinrich as an example, but I just think it's funny.
I wouldn't swap the two. I'm just saying I'd move everybody else up one and put him down like 8 spots.
Yeah. So, on this list, there are 2 athletes that did not have good seasons last year: Saxon Panchik and Guy Maeros. They didn't make the games, and you would expect to see Saxon and Guy at the games, and to have them ranked inside the top 20, not having make the games, is it's making a statement of a certain kind. Now Saxon was injured at the semifinals, and that's different than not qualifying. The thing about Guy not qualifying for the games is he has a known deficiency, which is basically his endurance events, his long distance running, etc. And he got punished for that, despite the fact that he had some incredibly impressive performances at semifinals. There weren't enough people that were good at that high skill, high weight stuff that he was to make up the difference between the other 2 guys who ended up taking those game spots. That's, to me, draws into more of a question of, are we evaluating the caliber of athletes in the right way around the world, which is a very difficult thing to do, more than whether or not this guy is fit. I still think that if you put him in a competition against the best guys in the world, that he's going to be in the top 20. Maybe not in the top. I don't know if he'll be in the top 10 anymore, but I do think that he's in the top 20.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, that's where you have him. But I think I don't know, like he got 7th that one year, and it's been downhill every single year.
7th,
still top 10.
Yeah. And like I just think he's a one-trick pony, and until he gets out of that, until he shows me he's not that, then it's hard for me to like him.
Yeah, and liking him is different than respecting what he can do in competition.
Okay, I'll change. That's what I mean, respecting what he can do. Because I just think the weightlifting event is going to kill, and then everything else he's going to get killed.
I mean, he did win 3 events that year that he took 7th at the games. So
I just
he's got,
think
very fast twitch muscle
fiber. Of the programming more than him. And when you're a product of the programming, it's hard for me to rank you very high, because you could get lucky and then you could get really unlucky. Right?
Yeah, sure. What do you think about Hopper here, 15?
I think that's great.
It's probably the ranking the ranking he deserves, I guess.
I think so. This whole 10 through 20, 11 through 20 is like just a list of inconsistency or unknowns, and we have no idea. All 10 of these guys could be 8 spots higher or lower than where Brian has them, and he's probably just split the middle. That's where they're going to be. I feel very comfortable. Sam Quant, I said 8 spots. I just threw that out there. Has gotten 2nd and 4th at the games, like recently, right?
On even years. So I'm just saying, 2024. Just saying, even years.
Right.
The Quant year.
So
the Quant year.
I feel, and like Chandler Smith's always been this way. He's very inconsistent. Noah Olson, we don't know about. Noah Olson, that's probably where he'll end up. I have no problem with Noah Olson. Saxon Panchik, kind of the same thing. And then Jay Crouch and Yellow Hosta. I mean, Jay Crouch has been improving little by little. It's just, it's just, can he improve enough to take that next step into that next tier? And I don't really think he can, but We'll see.
I don't know. Jay Crouch was one of maybe the most impressive male athlete for me between the games and Rogue combined this year, relative to what I thought and what he did.
I agree. But to improve from that, I think it's going to be really difficult.
Do you think he needs to make that move to Nashville and train full time at Proven to make that next jump?
I mean, I think whatever he's doing is working. I would tap this out until you stop improving, because he's made up tremendous ground on everybody. And he's kind of a guy that's like, doesn't have a lot of holes, but doesn't have a lot of home run hits. So if his whole entire just floor, it's just rising, I would keep doing what you're doing until that kind of taps out, and you'll get a feel for it. And then change it up if you want to.
Would you put him higher than this?
I mean, I don't. If you put him 14th, I wouldn't care. If you put him 17th, I wouldn't care.
And which you might end up
wherever, like, in that 13
range
through 18, any range you want to put him in that, I wouldn't argue with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you remove Chandler and Noah from that list, he's which we think they're both going team. That moves him up to 14 or 15. So,
it's hard. You can't really say he's going to be top 10.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I think that's too much.
Yeah, and when we look at the top 10 here in a second, you'll see that yes, he did beat some of those guys this year, but
you got to do it a couple of years in a row to break that mold.
Sure.
I would, we felt that way about Lazar and BKG, and then eventually it was like, I think Lazar's it now. Like, Lazar, I think, has the edge. If they were neck and neck, but it's always BKG, and then now they're neck and neck, but it's always Lazar. Does that make sense at all?
Yep. Yeah, they flipped. They kind of flipped.
And then Yellow Hosta, I think we just got to see more of him. I mean, the guy's awesome. He's been killing it, but he feels like it's going to be an inconsistent type of a guy as far as how he's going to place. He feels very program dependent as well. So I think we just need to see more of him before we can. Like, I think he's appropriate.
Well, and this is
Bailey Martin both. Bailey Martin's kind of
this is the reality of this group of the list. These are guys that I'm projecting as top 20 in the world. Chandler Smith and Noah Olson, as Patrick said, might compete on a team next year. There's no guarantee Yellow Hosta makes the games, let alone semifinals next season, based on what we know about him. We talked about how difficult it is to qualify for the games out of Oceania. We're assuming that Ricky and Jay take the two of those spots, which leaves one, which means Bailey has to have basically a perfect season, competition to get that spot if they have three again. And then Guimaeros didn't make the games this year. So half of the top 20 in the world, at this moment where we're projecting may not be at the games next season.
True. As individuals, yeah. All right. Moving into the first set of top 10. 4 through 10.
Oh, goodness. I see why everybody's mad at you about Pat.
Melvin, my guy. What do you mean, dude?
No. I'm fine. But I can see why people, like, coming off a Rogue, people always want to treat Rogue like it's
recency bias.
That's the new
ranking, the new games.
And Rogue is not the games. I don't know how many times we have to say it's not the games, but it's not. Travis Mayer, I think, is beautiful in that position.
Look, I think Travis has earned this spot based on what he did in Madrid and what he did at Rogue. I think that taking the season off last year was the best decision for him. He wasn't sure if he'd come back and want to be motivated to compete. He looks as good as I've ever seen him look, quite frankly. He's one of these guys that I was talking about who's in their 30s, and he's still keeping up, if not improving. It's really impressive. Can he get a top 10 at the games? I'm not sure, but I think that what I've seen from him so far warrants this respect. And John, it feels like you see the same.
Yeah, I mean, and I know we always talk about like Lazar and BKG. I feel like you could throw Travis Mayer into that like throuple. And like I think he's always around that spot too. Lazar, Travis, and BKG. And then I have no problem with 10 through 4. I think that's where I would have 10 through 4. I'll be honest with you. I think the top 3 guys in whatever order are the most likely to win the games. And again, this is for 2024. Who do you think will win the CrossFit Games? Something always happens with Vellner. It's just not going to happen. And if it happens, I'll be really, really happy. But I think Brian's with me on this. He's proven that it's just not going to happen. Medeiros, you have to respect. The guy was the fittest guy in the world for 2 years. He had an off year. I think you have to respect him and I think that he's worthy of that spot. Brent Fikowski and Dallin Pepper, I think could go either way, just depending on who you like better. Brent has the consistency behind him. So I'm fine with Brent, or, the veteranship, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I mean, it might be the last year that Fikowski is ranked ahead of Pepper.
Dallin.
Pepper's
but I think they could be
moving up.
intertwined, those two. I have no problem. I think 10 through 4, legitimately, I think I would have the exact same ranking.
And something to note before we get into the top 3 is like these rankings, when it comes to the games, these rankings, especially the podium, could be separated by just mere points. So just because Vellner's 4th doesn't mean it's 3rd and then a long distance from 4th. I mean, it could be down to the last event.
Well, obviously, I have to say something about Vellner because it's what a majority of the comments were about initially. And John's right. Everyone just saw him have an amazing performance at Rogue. He's a 2-time champion there. He's 3-time champion of Wadapalooza. He's gotten second place at Dubai. I have him ranked as the 3rd fittest man of all time. I think that his consistency from 2016 to now is basically unparalleled. Fraser went away from the sport. Pat's continued to compete at the top end. But when it comes to the games, I mean, he would have lost to Jeff and Roman this year by a considerable margin, which means that he's not in the mix to win the CrossFit Games right now. He hasn't been within striking distance of winning the games in recent years, really ever, because of Fraser and then Medeiros and then Ricky and Roman and Jeff. And 2 years ago, it was those 3 guys.
Was 2 years ago with Justin Medeiros was winning the CrossFit Games,
the first year,
and he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's like you, and I know people are like, well, Ricky, how can you? It's like, dude, Ricky beat him at the games the last time they competed there. He beat him at Wadapalooza the last time he competed, which is where Pat is usually unstoppable. And Ricky, I don't know, broke his shoulder and collarbone and everything else like 8 months ago, and he won the hardest qualifier in the world to qualify for, and he competed pretty well at Rogue, improving his spot from last year. And I don't think he's at 100%. The only caution I have about putting Ricky, which is who he's 3rd on the list, that I have having Ricky that high, is that he's competing a ton. He's, he did the qualifier. He's doing Rogue. I think he's doing Down Under on a team with his brother and Spencer Panchik, and he's going to Dubai. He's planning to do both Indy and team at Wadapalooza. Like, that's a lot of competition. But I get it if you're Ricky, because he's missed a lot of competitions in his career.
Got 4 years to make up for.
5 after last year.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
And you got to pay bills. He's got dogs. All right.
No disrespect to Pat at all. I love the guy as a friend. I love him as a competitor. When I'm evaluating his fitness against those guys and the likelihood of them winning the games, I don't think he has as good a chance as them.
Ricky's a great example.
I can guarantee you that both John and I would be absolutely ecstatic if Vellner won the CrossFit Games in 2024.
100%. 100%. I would never be happy to be more wrong, or more happy to be wrong. Ricky is a good example of the games is an event that favors him more than the other events that are out there in the CrossFit world.
Perfect segue, John. Perfect segue.
Is like the last time Ricky did a full games, he was in first place for the majority of the competition, and then he lost it on the back half. And why did he lose it? Because he's weak, right? He has since gotten a lot stronger. And you saw that on the squat event, the log squat event, that the previous year. Go watch Back Attack. It's called Back Attack on Rogue. It was not this year, but the last year.
With the back squats, yeah.
Yeah, Ricky was one of the last place people. The squat was really, really heavy for him, and it was 405. This year was 375 for the same reps, but 5 at a time instead of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Same amount of volume. And Ricky won the event going away. Won the event, got a no rep. Oh, let me go back and do another squat. Went and then did another squat and still won by 30 seconds.
In the first heat. In the first heat.
He obliterated everybody in a heavy squat workout. I get it. The muscle ups were the workout.
He was 18th the previous year in the back.
Wow.
In the back.
So second to last.
Yep. And like Kotler said, they came off of a nasty squat program. And I don't know if there is any camp out there better at improving their individual athletes than Underdogs. I'm not going to say like they're the best camp, but like as far as just their individuals that they're working with, like straight up one-to-one coaching, I don't know if there is a better camp, because if you look at their people, where they came from, their weaknesses, and how they approach their weaknesses, they're killing it. And I think Ricky at the games is freaking special. He's got home run ability better than almost anybody else. Maybe not Roman, but right up there with him. And he's like when he goes. The reason why he's third is because he can't stop getting hurt. Like if he did this year's games, you ask Kotler, and I get Kotler is very biased. Kotler's Ricky's coach, and he's biased, but he should be. This is the
the slate of workout from the 2023 CrossFit Games. I spent a considerable amount of time looking at this. I think a healthy Ricky would have won the games this year.
Yeah.
And if not win, he'd have definitely been in the running. Like he would have been there on the last.
Yeah, event. Those three guys would have been Roman, Jeff, and Ricky would have been battling in the way that Justin, Jeff, and Ricky were the previous year. 100 points clear of Vellner and the rest of the guys. That's what I think.
I would 100%. And if you go watch the 2022 CrossFit Games, the way that ended up, where it was Ricky, Roman, and Justin, it would have been Jeff, Ricky, and Roman. Those three, like Ryan just said, but like a very great battle. And that was a really, really fun CrossFit Games, I thought, because we didn't know who was going to win until the last event. And Justin kind of pulled away at the end. But
don't you love that picture of Halpin? Cave Dastro.
He's a very happy man in his element.
Yeah.
Cave Dastro. I think I met him in Phoenix, but I don't know what he looks like. I believe he said hi to me, but didn't introduce himself as his real name.
You didn't have his cornrows in?
No, he definitely didn't look like that. All right, let's do the last two. I got to get going here in a few minutes, Pat.
Yep. All right, moving on to number 2, Roman, which Roman's not very happy about.
Hold on, guys. Hold
on. Roman at number 2. Why Roman at number 2, Brian?
John, did you see this comment from Roman? It's on the right side of the screen.
I'm reading your response.
It came out really well. There's 11 responses, so you have to look at all of them to see my initial response. Roman, what were you smoking when you made this list?
Wait, so you're that mad? That's funny.
And I said
mad that you said you wasn't first.
No, actually, I have spoken. I talked to him and Logan. They were just messing with me, but I have recently been watching the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit on some of my travels. So I mentioned that I was smoking pipe weed from the Shire, which some people, like a lot of people, seem to like that comment. And a little bit of back and forth here with the guy who decided to pull Ricky and Daniel Brandon into the conversation for some reason. But this is like this guy, fitness adaptation. Seriously, didn't Vellner just win a major competition? Pipe weed with crack. And that's like, this is the conversation we just had. Yes, Vellner won at Rogue. Obviously, we know that he won at Rogue. That's not the only thing we're considering. Look at what Roman's done the last 2 years at the CrossFit Games. He's clearly a contender to win. A lot of people think he would have won this year if he didn't break his foot. There's no way to really know that. There's no reason to take anything away from what Jeff Adler did, which is why I've continued to rank him at number 1. Staying healthy does matter. Consistency across time does matter. Jeff, I believe, is the guy to beat right now, but I also think he's beatable. And I think that the most likely person to do that is Roman.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why people would get in a tizzy about Roman being second, but like, I think if you ask me what I think is going to happen, I think Roman is going to win the 2024 CrossFit Games. I think Roman is going to be the fittest man in the world, but currently Jeff Adler is the fittest man in the world. And in 4 months, in 4 months, they had 2 major competitions with everybody that's there, everybody that the top 15 fittest guys in the world, both competitions, they're there, right? Jeff has beaten him in both of those competitions. And now, granted, he, other circumstances why he won the games, but we don't know that Roman would win the games. People are assuming that Roman would win the games if he didn't hurt his foot. We don't know. Jeff didn't push the last event. if he did push the last event, who's to say who's going to win that workout? I don't think it's a home run hit for Roman. I know it's the Viking, but like the thrusters were a big deal in that workout. So like I would have Roman number one if you ask me who do you think is going to win the CrossFit Games in 2024. But I also think I'm a little bit biased by that, and I just think I want Roman to win, so I'm going to pick him to win, and then I would pick Adler to be second. So I don't have a problem with that. Honestly, I might even pick Ricky to be second. But I think all three of those guys are really, really close together. And
the other thing that's like, I don't know. I'm not sure, but like I saw Jeff Adler after the Rogue Invitational, and he took second place there. It was, a great finish. A lot of guys would have wanted that finish. He considered that a loss. Like he shows up to competitions now expecting to win. That's what Adler is. And I think Roman's the same way. I think Ricky's the same way. I think Pat's the same way. And it's the best thing that really we have going on in the sport right now is how competitive the guys at the top of this sport are. John and I'm not sure if we agree on this 100%. I still think Justin has a chance to win any major competition he shows up to. And I think there are at least 5 guys that, could win on any given weekend. So that's something we haven't always been able to take, to say about the sport. There have been a lot of dominating figures, 1 or 2 figures throughout many, many years of the early parts of this sport. And right now in the men's side, it feels like there's a good amount of parity with a lot of guys who are super fit in, prime condition to not just show up and compete well, but to potentially win. All these guys have wins on their resume. So, they're very competitive, very good. And there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with our picks. But this is kind of how we see it at this point when we're projecting for what's most likely next year. This is something that I did when I was writing the article. As we were going through the 50, 100, whatever, I was just kind of looking at where they ended up separating. I try not to consider that when I'm doing this. I do like to have a little bit of representation from each part of the world, at the very least within the top 200. And this is kind of how it broke down. About half the guys are from North America, about a third of them from Europe, and then the last 20% or so is from the rest of the world. The main thing that's notable about that is this year's almost 60% of the semifinalists will come from those bottom 4 continents there. That's just the way that the CrossFit Games have decided to distribute semifinal spots this season, coming out of quarterfinals, which means that, man, those just to get into those North American and European semifinals are going to be extremely competitive. And there are athletes that are inside the top 100 in the world, in my opinion, that will miss out on the semifinals this year.
Can I respond to Halpin's comment real quick?
Sure. Which comment?
The last one.
This one?
That's true. But Adler ended up winning by 152 points over Roman, right? So that means Roman would have had to get 2 fifth-place finishes in the last 2 events. And then that's not with Adler not going any harder. You don't think he's going to go harder whenever he does, like it's not wrapped up. The whole competition was wrapped up for him with the last 2 events. He would have went harder, which means Roman would have had to maybe get a 4th and a 2nd, which is still super doable. I'm not saying Roman can't do that, but it's not a given that Roman gets a 4th and a 2nd in those workouts. I don't think anybody was beating Fikowski in the parallel bar workout. So it's not a given is all that I'm saying.
Well,
but overall, I don't think we disagreed as much as people wanted us to, Brian. I feel like my disagreed the most about Ant Haynes, ironically.
John Young, Ant Haynes fan club president.
I didn't see that coming. I thought your top 10 is not very dissimilar from what my top 10 would be at all.
Yeah, and I mean, there's kind of two prongs with this this kind of a list. One is obviously we're trying to assess the best in the world. And it's fun to have those conversations. On the other hand, much more in line with kind of what this whole offseason is for me, is I'm trying to increase awareness globally about the best athletes that are out there, where they're competing, what they're doing, what their potential is, and put them on the radar for the people that like that kind of stuff as we head into the rest of the offseason and ultimately next year's semifinals and games. And so, that's what we're continuing to do. I'm sure there are many names on the list that are unfamiliar to a lot of you, but hopefully you can be able to, if you see them pop up in a stream that I'm doing, a competition, a rankings, something like that. You can kind of start to learn some of those guys. It was very cool at Desert City Classic. I think a couple of people were watching the stream that had also watched Iron Games, and they recognized, excuse me, a few of the athletes from there. They're not going to show up at the games maybe ever. They may not be in the top 20 or 50 in the world, but they are out there competing podium at some of these tier 2, 3, 4 competitions. And it's good. You have to have that foundation of competition in any sport that filters towards the top. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to provide more coverage of those building blocks that lead towards the games globally around the nation, so that you guys can start to learn more about those athletes. So those are kind of the goals there. I know that I've probably left a couple off the list. I'm sure there's some that I've misappropriated their rankings for. I tried to do my best in that. I tried to pay respect to everyone. And it's challenging. There's not like a great system for that, keeping track of all those things right now. There is the worldwide ranking system, but it accounts for some very specific things that are not possible to account for everything that I see in the off season. So if you do think that there's someone that's missing from the list and you have compelling evidence as to why, please send it to me. Totally open-minded to that. A couple people have already done that, which I appreciate. And the women's list is coming out next week. And that this is an opportunity. If you think there are some names, even if you think that he probably has on the list, but you're not sure, send them to me. I'll check it out. I'll see if they're worthy of potentially being included, or at least put them on my radar for further inclusion going forward. So be on the lookout for the women's next week. And thank you guys for all the engagement today.
John, thanks a lot for showing up, and appreciate you taking the time with us as always. Any last thing you want to say?
Yeah, no problem. I had a good time. I didn't know it was
Okay.
going to go this long, which is fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it if you guys are fine. But I feel like
Yeah.
the women, there'll be more disagreement at the top. There's a lot more to talk
Spiegel,
about.
top 5?
Stop. I'm more mean about like Mallow, Ryan, and Haley.
They're on the list.
There's a lot of just unknowns with the women.
Yeah. And that's what makes the sport so cool, that we can all talk about stuff like this. But again, John, thanks. Appreciate you coming on. Like Brian said, next week we have the women's top 200 coming out. As always, like, subscribe, comment what Brian said. Also, we still have our Alex Gazan card giveaway. Register for our newsletter. You'll be put in for the drawing for 1 of 7 of the cards that we have autographed by Alex Gazan. So, on behalf of Brian and John, you guys be friendly, our friends.